So it's going to be visual and audio, is it?
Well, it's audio really, Jim, but
oh, is it right? Okay.
It's the best thing I've got to record the audio as well, so it's
fine.
As long as you don't mind. Yeah, some of these might cross over from your answers, you know.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just go through and answer them as best I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Right. So when do you want to start? You're going to ask the question?
I can answer, yeah.
Okay.
You joined Wycombe Wanderers as manager in January 1988, following the departure of Peter Suddaby. What had you been doing up until then, and had you any previous connections with Wycombe that particularly attracted you to the job?
Yeah, I'd had some fairly strong ones, actually, because as a player I always played against them for Hayes and different clubs, Slough. And a lot of my work in coach education was done at Bisham Abbey. And there was quite a congenial person who was in charge of that, and he was Brian Lee. And Brian would occasionally walk his dog Ref around the pitches while we were there. And once or twice he would sort of sidle up to me and say, "Why aren't you Wycombe Wanderers manager?" And at that sort of stage I recognised the fact that if the job became vacant, he might ask me. But it was a bit of a dream, because Wycombe were always a top quality club with top quality players. So that's really, at the time I was managing at Maidenhead, and they'd started fairly low in the league, and I'd driven them up to about second from the top place in their division in the Eastmead League. So when Wycombe contacted me, it was quite, it wasn't totally without thought. It was, I think Brian Lee was thinking about it for maybe a year or so. Yeah.
So they came to you rather than you actively looking to...
Oh yeah, I was approached by Brian, and I did a match analysis on his players, the Wycombe players at the time, and then met the board of directors, and subsequently got the job, which was quite pleasing.
Wonderful. When you were appointed, did you have a particular objective or a goal at the club in any particular length of time? Yeah,
it was quite apparent that the team were virtually going to extinction again, back away from the combat, not to extinction, but certainly into an area where they were going to lose a lot of financing inside the club, with the lucrative business of being in the conference. And I think the club were quite desperate to avoid that situation. So my main prime directive was to get that club to avoid relegation, and that was for sure. Subsequently, we looked at it strongly, and then we looked at the business of the way Wycombe played, which was always an attractive, free-flowing style of football. And in that season, that part of the season, we had to visit Kidderminster Harriers, and there was a big notice up there, champions-elect. They'd already decided they were going to be champions that particular year, and in the end they didn't, but that's what they were thinking. And they totally outplayed us, make no mistake. They tore us to pieces, and with quick, exciting, attractive football. And I vowed that if I could turn Wycombe around to the extent that bringing players in, that we could play the quality of football that would outplay them, then I'd be quite happy. That would be a tremendous thing to achieve. Good.
You were particularly influential in bringing Wycombe to the attention of school children, obviously doing what you're still doing, going around to the schools and everything like that. Was that all your initiative, or was there some form of local and youth development at the club as you joined?
Yeah, some people say to me, you know, in my time at Wycombe, which was 2 years, and what do you think you achieved? And quite unequivocally, I could turn around and say, when I joined the club, they handed me the keys, and I opened the stadium on training nights, and Andy Robinson, after I signed him, he was chief team maker because he was great. He would arrive early, keen, enthusiastic, fantastic person, Andy, and still in life.
Okay. Shortly after you joined the club, Ivor Beeks took over as chairman. At the same time, I'm not quite sure on the history. I don't know if the club was already planning to move stadium at that point before you even joined, or whether that came about as a result of Ivor becoming chairman. But how did those changes affect the club, short term and long term?
Fairly strongly, really, because to be quite honest, I got on tremendously well with Brian Lee, and his background was steeped in football, and I also got on really well with Ivor. But it was his first job as a chairman, and at times we didn't hit it off totally, and that's no problem, because it's very rare that you get managers and coaches that would work totally in harmony with either, who had to have the overall best interest of the club in his heart. I felt that with strengthening the club, we could have achieved league status in the previous year, without any question about that. We had a fantastic team, and we might have gone all the way that year. But the thought strongly in the minds of the club were the fact that the Adams Park, which it was called then, that wouldn't be ready, and we'd have this whole business of maybe playing on loan grounds, or would we be allowed Football League status with the ground not ready. So there was a bit of a miasma on that one, and to be quite honest, it affected us to the extent that the mood by the players was that we should have pushed and gone, and we had a fantastic chance after playing Fisher that their guy was caught on by a police investigation on drugs, and we could have bought 3 of their top players. And that was open and available for us, and those 3 players would have been the edge to take us in, because we needed a little bit. The squad was a good squad, but it was quite tight. But the move for Wycombe has always been best, and in the long-term future of the club, it proved correct. So it was a bit of a bitter pill for me to swallow at the time, but in the long-term interest of the club, it was absolutely right.
Yeah. John Kerr is a name that's you've been at a couple of clubs with him at Wycombe, and then
yes,
also at Cheshire United later on. Was he a particular favourite player to work with, or someone that you really thought brought something to your teams?
Yeah, he was just a fantastic man. He travelled around the world. He made his living out of his football prowess. Played in Ireland, played in France, played in the United States of America, and was a great acquisition to the club. I think Ivor was a little bit miffed that John was a free spirit, and wanted him tied down on a 2-year, 3-year contract. Well, the only contract John signed like that was for Millwall, and so John moved on to Millwall and had quite a successful time up there, playing in the first team a few times, and it was a good move at that stage of his career. But John I enjoyed because of his total professionalism. Mind you, all my players had that. We didn't have a player in there that wasn't totally committed to the style of football we played and the way we did it. No, I was. But John, still a lifelong friend of mine. He's out in working for one of the big universities in America, Harvard, and I bumped into him when I was across doing a Memphis elite player group of American players about 2 years ago. So that was good fun. John, yeah. Tap on the shoulder, Mr. Kelman. So yeah, it was great.
Among the other players that you brought into the club, there were, basically the core of the team that went on to do some very good things. You brought Nicky Evans in from Barnet for what was then a conference record. Yeah. Matt Crossley, Simon Stapleton, we've spoken about, Andy Kerr, and Glyn Creaser, who history tells us joined in a strange way. Perhaps you can explain exactly what happened.
Yeah, certainly. By the way, in those days, as a manager, you always had certain managers calling you and offering advice and looking for, I suppose it's the old version of networking. And at the time, Barry Fry was always on the phone to me, and his gravel voice, he was always chatting backwards and forwards, and he was always trying to shift players out or get players in, and it was always a puzzle, really, with Barnet, which selection of players you'd actually play against. And in what formation. He would just move a player, make him play in a different formation because a professional club was watching him. He didn't want to win the game, he wanted to sell the player. So it was always quite fun pitting your wits against Barry Fry and his chairman, obviously. And well, the Glyn Creaser one was the fact that the week before, him and Mark Wester had a right set to, and Mark Wester was sent off because he was trying to retaliate on this man giant that Glyn Creaser was. And anyway, during the week, Barry Fry was on the phone to me and he said, "Do you want Creaser?" Just like that, just out of the blue. He said he's had a big argument with the chairman, he's had enough, he wants to get out of the club. Now, just how much are you going to offer me for Creaser? So anyway, I said, "Barry, you know and I know that I've got a centre-back. I'm quite happy with my centre-backs. I don't really, he's just been sent off, he got my player sent off. How do I feel about Glyn Creaser?" Secretly saying, if we get hands on this fella, he is a fantastic player. He's absolutely everything you dream for, and a marvellous man as well. When, after I signed him, you grew to know him. But we had watched Glyn Creaser several times before that the one thing I did at Wycombe when I was there, I set up a strong scouting unit of 3 scouts, and John Reardon had brought Glyn Creaser's name back to us 2 or 3 times, and we were just hopeful that there might be a glimmer with him. So Glyn Creaser's name came on the phone, and sure enough, we got the opportunity, and in the end, we bought him for 15,000, but Barry Fry then slapped a few VAT on the top, obviously, to push it up a bit. But it was a total bargain. It was an amazing coup, really. And as soon as we got him to Wycombe, we worked strongly with Glyn. It was just a joy to work with. Yeah.
That might lead us on to the next question nicely. Obviously, you brought Dave Carroll and Steve Guppy in. Was Dave Carroll a player who you had scouted yourself, or was he brought to your attention?
No, I'd always had teams that played in non-league football, and Dave Carroll was always a player that I would have played in one of my teams. He was lithe, graceful, fantastic touch, and possibly, and almost certainly, should have been a professional straight away when he left school. But that's life. You know, sometimes it works that players are late developers, and Dave certainly was that. But he was a loyal person to his family and his background, and also loyal to Rycett Manor. But when I approached strongly, and David knew me quite well from my days as manager at Hungerford, where we had quite phenomenal success for a small club, and then subsequently when I was at Maidenhead for a little while, it was just that he was made to come to Wycombe, and it didn't take too much to persuade David. That was probably one of the best signings I ever made. The best one was the next fella you're going to talk to me about, Steve Guppy. We tracked Steve Guppy for 3 years. And I had Matt Crossley's dad, Ian Crossley, covered the whole of the south of England for me in terms of looking for players. And Steve, we had wanted to get for the previous 2 years, but he felt he was between Portsmouth and Southampton. He desperately wanted professional football, and it worked out for him great in the end. And we got Steve just on the edge of him not being put in the teams what he thought he should be in. And we got him off the back end of his professional career that went sour for him, really. But a delight to have once again, and a wonderful person to have inside your club. Great talent with his left foot. I mean, when you think about Dave Carroll's talent with his right foot, and I've got Steve Guppy now.
Perfect forward, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was just... But those players were in my mind. So when I got the job at Wycombe, I knew inside football, non-league football, going right up through the leagues, certain players would be a must. Creaser was one. If you're going to have anyone in your club, you'd have a Creaser. Yep. If anyone in your club, you'd have a Matt Crossley. And Matt, I knew because he'd played for me before, he'd worked with me strongly before, and he was, in England, they play with this strange old-fashioned 4-4-2 stuff. Well, I changed all that. We went straight in with the system I played in all my clubs, and that's with a sweeper. And the forwards in the conference hated being man-marked, to the extent one of them actually wanted to see me afterwards, one of the top strikers, and he had a right go at me, and then bought me a drink, because Matt Crossley said, I don't like people touching me. I don't want him touching me. And it was a Macclesfield centre forward, you see, and he was waiting for me after the game outside. I said, you got a problem? He said, yeah, you're centre forward, centre half, he keeps touching me. But that was how close Matt got to people. Now that guy said, fair play to you, come on, let's have a drink. You know, he was great. But that's the sort of attention to detail we went into with Matt and with Glyn. And that allowed me to have the luxury of a sweeper playing around them. Andy Kerr obviously became that, until obviously his injuries started to play on it. But again, another wonderful player to have.
Yeah, certainly impressive core for the team, and they stayed on going through professional as well.
Oh, yeah, they were all good enough to be. I mean, Simon Stapleton, I tried to get away from Bristol before then, and he'd hesitated. Then he said, I'm not sure if professional football's going to give me a career. I'm just interested in coaching. And I said, fine, come to me, and we'll do both. So that was great. So Simon came like that, and it was good. Yeah, they were good people to have, because they were quality.
Yeah, it showed. Nowadays, has been for a while, the atmosphere in the crowd at Adams Park is criticised by home and away fans for perhaps being too quiet. Was that always the case at Lokes Park?
No, it was one of the biggest heart wrenches for me when I left the club was the crowd. They were totally fantastic, and I could never really explain to the club or the ground or the people inside the club my reasons for leaving. And really, they'd probably be best to remain secret as well, because really it was a personal thing between myself and Ivor Biggs, and that's what it was. After that, probably Ivor realised you treat managers a little bit differently, but certainly I didn't really want to leave, and I resigned despite all they're saying in the papers about me being sacked. It was a bit stupid, but there again, in hindsight, I think personally it was the best move for probably Wycombe, because they got a guy who can withstand the pressures of chairman and people like that, and he was quite well equipped for that. Not a coach, didn't profess to be a coach. I spoke to him on the phone. He said, "I'm not a coach, Jim. I know you brought all these players in and you work well with them." He said, "That's someone else's job, that's not my job." And he was quite straight up with it, Martin O'Neill. But he had the strength to hold probably chairman off and go ahead and do his business quite strongly, and motivate players. And I've always held him in great regard, because he took a team, the team I created, up to where they should have been, you know, if I'd have had the chance to stay. But it was right for me to leave. Everyone leaves at the right time. And so I spent 2 years at the club, and it was time for me to move on, probably. Yeah, it's the long-term business of inside football clubs. There's not many do that.
And he had a coach, which was Paul Franklin, that you brought into the club.
Yeah, that's right. And I took Paul Franklin through his coaching qualifications. And so it's always been a family affair. And whenever I go back to the club, Ivor's always made me friendly, and the rest of the board of directors. And I probably don't go back enough. But to be quite honest, with all the football I get involved in, a walk on the Cornish Coast Path or a walk in the Wiltshire Hills is a great tonic for me these days. But I do go back occasionally, and when I do, it's just like family. The club is, and that's from Ivor all the way through. It's a delight going back into the company. It is.
That's great. Wage structure is the next one. Obviously, times have changed a lot, but with a wage bill of around about £130,000 while you were the boss for players, and a management wage bill of around £30,000, figures are purported to be about 10 times that now, are in circulation for a league that's only one division higher in the pyramid, if you like, as when you were there. What do you think of that? Do you think it's justified? Do you think it's a sign of the times? Do you think the players are any better?
I think if you talk about finance, working in proportion to the money I had then, that would be considerably higher now anyway. I think this whole business of the amount of football that's money being paid into football wage packets, to begin with, it was always too small, because players' careers are always going to be short, and the public enjoy those stars for a very finite time, and it's only going to be a question of when they get injured, and then when they become discarded and thrown out by the club, and they get another player in anyway. So fair play to players nowadays. If they can get paid that sort of money to portray their skills in front of big crowds, then great. The question comes when the pain of the players becomes a burden on the club, and that's up to the financial structure inside the club. I know certain different clubs do it different ways, and that would be an important factor inside that as well. Okay, you're going to turn that on. Should we turn it off and move elsewhere? They're all going to be piling in now.
Fine, okay.
Is it? Is there any
There's
more?
not that much. There's a couple. There's not that much more.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Okay, shall I move up here a bit so you can rest it? Is that all right?
If I set this up here. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. When talking to most fans, the highlights they tend to come up with are two particular league games against Kidderminster Harriers. One was a 1-0 win in front of a big crowd at Lokes Park. The other was a fantastic comeback, a 3-3 draw after being 3-0 down. And at the same time, most fans would count their low points during your range with results against Hyde and the Metropolitan Police. What were your personal high and low points from a footballing point of view at the club?
Going back to when we spoke about being at Kidderminster Harriers, and they were saying they were champions elect and what they were going to do and what they weren't going to do. It was quite nice that one of the top newspapers in the country on a Sunday said that without doubt Wycombe Wanderers are the finest footballing side in the league, and that was one of my highest points, because we worked hard to perfect a flowing style that was difficult at Lokes Park because of the slope and difficult to play. It wasn't an easy pitch to play. But we worked strategies and tactics on that pitch, and And the glorious days of seeing John Granville rise to get the ball coming in from the low slope, and then send Steve Abley on his way on the high slope, with John Kerr spinning off the first defender. And they were absolutely hopelessly outclassed in that area, because we had pace and direction. And West coming across the near post, Durham round the back, because I converted Kevin Durham from a midfield player into a wide left player. Played with 3 players up front, which was unheard of in the conference then either, but they were quite mobile players that interchanged quite quickly. They were also a small front 3. John Kerr was the same height as Mark West, probably 5'8", 5'9", and Kevin Durham was about 5'10", quite small. And against the conference then, who had very big, strong, aggressive centre-backs, well, we just ran sideways across them, and they couldn't cope with it, and they couldn't cope with that style of football. So that was my highs. I think one of the goals we scored, one of the big ones was Macclesfield. Macclesfield came to Wycombe and smashed them about 7 something, I believe, before I got there. And apparently it was they walked past the home dressing room knocking. Each one would knock on the door saying, "Come on out, we've got some more for you at half time." Well, we had Macclesfield at home when we had Charles Hughes down to open up the development scheme that I'd set up with the local community. And we beat them quite handsomely that day. And it's not often you get that.
Yeah.
You've got your whole development for the club set up with all the local schools and people like that. And at the same time, you get a big game and a big crowd and a big result. So that was a big high point to have Charles Hughes down. It was great, because Charles was, you know, in those days, and Charles is a friend of mine. He actually mentored me going back all those years, and a brilliant coach. Just got absorbed in this long ball game a little bit. So when Steve Abley got the ball, he would be expecting him to roll open and just click the ball forward. And so he came up to me afterwards, and it was, "Well, Jim, now carrying the ball out of defence. Now that's effective." And that's all he said. But yeah, it was brilliant, because no, that's effective. But Steve Abley was a threat, a big threat. But I had lots of great highs. And Hyde was a particular disappointment, because they played on an artificial pitch, which nowadays they wouldn't be able to play on. And we got hustled out of it, really. But no regrets, because on the day they took their goal and we didn't. We had a great chance with Kevin Durham just before the end, and he sliced it wide of the post. And I felt if we'd have gotten back to Lokes Park, it would have been us to go all the way that year. But however, that's the if onlys.
Yeah.
That's the if onlys.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving away from Wycombe, and just from a coaching point of view, there's been an awful lot made, and you can see it clearly watching on the television. A lot of, especially the Premiership, aggressive and abusive behaviour from players, gathering around referees, touching referees, which even when I was younger you just weren't allowed to do. As a development coach, how do you feel about that? It must be something you trying to... We
generally stay away from that, but we are heavily into attitudes and ethics inside clubs, and the behaviour of fans, the behaviour of spectators. The fans are normally stronger than that. They're great people. Sometimes it's the neutral spectators that come in there just for a shout and to stir up some problems. But basically, if you pay performance the highest sort of money they're getting now, it certainly doesn't give them the right to harangue referees, and that that clearly is not in order, and it never was. It never was, and there was a bit of that going on in the past, where teams would get round referees and try and influence them. But then that's down to the strength of the clubs, and really, if clubs are earning that much sort of money from their rights, from television, all that sort of thing, that can easily be addressed. But it would need someone strong to go in there. But I think the actual football nowadays, it's played at a faster pace, it's played with more agile and athletic players, and in all honesty, at the highest level, there isn't that much incident. I don't think so, and I watch a lot of football, and I don't see that much incident in the game. I think it's an amazing spectacle, especially when you've got clubs like Arsenal, who play the most amazing football. They liken me to the Wycombe Wanderers team I had. When they attack with pace and creativity, and they're just a joy to watch. Yeah. And so was my team. I love watching Wycombe when they played. It's fantastic to coach them as well, because we worked strongly on that the way we played. No. Good. No, I think it's changed for the better. Because if you watch television, you see the likes of Arsenal play and Barcelona and teams like this. It's just a joy.
Yeah. I read recently you've been training with Sir Clive Woodward, and a lot, of course, has been made as to what his qualities can be and how rugby and football can interchange. What qualities do you think he can bring, having worked with him?
Well, when Clyde came to do his qualifications, the FA steered him towards me, and that was quite pleasant, because obviously they would want someone with good qualifications to actually assist Clive to get his qualification, and he counts me now as his mentor, which is quite a nice thing. Yeah. And we formed our relationship as mentor-coach, and now we're friends because he's gone on and qualified as a level 2 coach and a level 3 coach. He is an amazing man. He has attention to detail that knows no boundaries. He will be a brilliant asset to football. It was his lifelong love when he was a young man, and if you read his book, it will tell you that his father really pushed him into his public school upbringing and rugby, really. He is already, strange enough, I went down and saw him last week and was a guest of his for a day down at Southampton, and what he's done for the club and established a training area second to none is the indoor dome they've got, and the offices, and the way that they're going to produce players down there is absolutely wonderful. And that's the sort of man. He will facilitate people as well. He will get good people around him, good people for Southampton. And although the first team results aren't great at the moment, that club will only go one way as long as Rupert Lowe and Sir Clive Woodward are allowed to do their business. Yeah. The fans are also hard people to please. As you know, they can easily change and turn, which is a shame. I mean, I was quite keen that Wycombe would achieve promotion this year, and I know John Gorman, and I regard John Gorman as a friend, because John's his approach, his philosophy, towards football is similar and akin to people like myself. Yeah. Who like to see attractive football played by quality players, and he's worked great wonders down at Wycombe.
It's superb to watch.
Yeah, and I've heard that because
really,
I keep
really
in touch. A lot of my students here are lifelong Wycombe fans anyway, and a lot of the people that come through here this particular college go on and become coaches inside the Wycombe Wanderers structure. So really, yeah, I'm closely tied to Wycombe in a way. Well, no, in lots of ways.
Yeah. No, it's tight finish to the season for them. Just to finish off, Jim,
see you fellas.
Your role now, it's obvious from what we're seeing here today, what you do and everything. What particular part of coaching, or is there a particular age group or a particular goal that players have that you really enjoy the most?
Good night, Carlos. It's quite interesting, really. It's since I left Wycombe, Johnny Granville, I got a job over in Trinidad. We went across and prepared their under-20 for national competition against the United States, Costa Rica and Guatemala. And in that time we visited Honduras and Panama. And that was fascinating, getting back into it there. At the same time, I was doing some development work for them and coach education out there, and introduced them to coaching courses. Flew up to Montserrat and delivered a level 1 course there under the smoking volcano, which was a fantastic experience. So football's given me a lot of wonderful experiences. The Wycombe Wanderers for 2 years was a marvellous experience in my life, a chapter, if you like, in the many other chapters I've had. But a fantastic chapter with the friends I made, and the club are always going to be something dear to me, because they treated me, the fans especially, treated me with respect all the way through. It was a great wrench to leave, I can tell you. What I do now is I prepare coaches, and I try and prepare those at the highest level I could. I used to prepare players to play, now I prepare coaches to prepare players to play. So it's a different slant, Ian, but it's still very much a strong thing. We've got now a network of about 15 to 20 sports colleges that I consult, and we still get the odd call to go abroad and do coaching courses and things like that. So I've got a busy life, really busy. The pressures of being a manager again, people always ask, would you go back to it? And I can firmly say, yes, I'd go back and visit Wycombe and visit Ivor and the rest of his colleagues in the boardroom there, and shake their hands. But as to taking up the manager's thing, that was a wonderful chapter, and pleased to be a part of it.
That's great.
Very pleased. Is that okay?
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.